more accessible and functional, especially for the new users who are going to join the product. And the solution we were exploring is having some sort of the panel on the left, which will allow you a quick access to things like your tab organizer, to be able to call that panel, have like a sliding thing, just there on the left, and see all the tabs that you're able to import into Edvo, in one place, and be able to move them into the respective spaces with ease, as well as some sort of a like outline or like a list which will show you the content of your space, along with your favorites, abilities to import your files and documents into Edvo, and affordance for a global search. So that was a starting point. We start here and we start critically look at at the patterns, interface patterns that we were like proposing for this, and seeing if there is any redundancy or anything that can be like optimized, united, and basically the goal for that was to figure out like what is the minimal amount of interface we can have in order to provide our users with the best experience and not clutter the screen with too much information and too much different panels and different UI entities. And the working solution that we come up with was basically like this. So we united a tool panel with basically we introduced more tools into the tool panel, and we get rid of those fixed left side bars in order to have just a little bit more fluent and floating navigation and display all the content of the spaces in a full bleed format, which to our thinking was a better way to demonstrate the content, and it was less restrictive on kind of like on an emotional level, was giving you a feel that you are in the space with the content, and all of the interface elements, they kind of like a second-class citizens to that. They are allowing you to create new stuff and navigate, but they are not necessarily taking too much screen real estate space, and can be dismissed in favor of focusing on the content itself. And we broke the left panel into three sections. First section is basically your navigation tools, the tools which are allowing you to select stuff, move it around, pan around, etc. Second part of the panel is going to host the tools like the unified import dialog, which will take the parts from the tab organizer, so ability to bring in the tabs into the space. But additional thing that I would like to discuss today, in the context of this dialog, is how to bring additional functionality here, allowing our users to upload the files and have the affordances and a little bit of helpful text to explain that, hey, there is much more stuff that you can bring into Edvo, and for accessibility purposes, you can do it in a couple of clicks using this dialog. But also, for ease of use, you can just drag and drop it directly into the space as you used to. Other thing, in this tool panel is a global search, and we can talk about the appearance and functionality for that particular piece. And the third one is the list of your favorites. And we went on a pretty lengthy discussion yesterday about what this panel would allow you to do and what are the functionalities that we want to build out. But on the surface, it's going to allow you to have a quick access to your favorite spaces and be able to navigate into those spaces. Additional functionalities is being able to transclude those spaces into the current space. So basically, like opening this panel, and if I want to include the sprint planning into this space, I'm just going to be dragging and dropping it and creating like a little portal for the quick access. But also the reverse can be true. Like if I want to include cookies into the sprint planning, I can just take that piece of content or a portal or whatever it is and just drag it into either like a favorite list to favorite it, or into the sprint planning to include that into that particular space. So there is a lot of potential here, though again, like on the surface, this is your tool to to have a quick access for to your favorite stuff and be able to navigate there quickly without need to hustle around and find things. And the third section, in this panel is basically your tools for creation, right? So like creating a new browser on the canvas, creating new sticky notes or a new note. And we thought, that this visual breakdown into 3 sections is a nice way to delineate between, pure like navigational tools within the canvas, tools which allow you to find, navigate and import content, and tools which allow you to create new content. So at this point, I would pause. I think that was a good refresher, for all of us, and I will bring us to the menu, because we potentially can have 4 conversations right now, continuing talking about the tools panel, and seeing if there is any additional options that we want to explore. Secondly, if we want to go deeper into, let's say, the unified import dialog, we can have a conversation about how to bring that upload functionality into that dialog and what it might mean for us. We can look into the global search and talk about that. I know that we haven't spent much time in that area. Or we can talk about the initial state of my universe space. And just for the context, my universe is like a starting point for all the users in the app. And especially for the new users, we want to build a state of this my universe space, which will give them a good overview of all the functionalities and all the benefits that Edvo can bring to them. So think about the space which will contain a couple of portals, some files, some instructions, some guides, for starting your journey with Edvo and being successful, and giving you, like a good overview of the functionalities and understanding of what you actually can do with Edvo. So I would open the floor, whatever you want to talk about, just say it, and I think we'll vote and choose the option to work on today.
Cool. Thanks for that, Alex. I'm most curious about the initial state of my universe space. And then second, probably the upload and tab organizer unification. Dan, Dar, how do you guys feel?
I concur.
Yeah, the only thing that I would call out is I don't think that we have discussed openly the design decision making behind my universe. That might be useful to touch on, but that may also be explained just in the course of talking about or intending to.
Yeah. So out of this 2, what do you think is going to be most helpful at this stage?
I would say my universe.
My universe, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So does anyone want to give like a brief introduction on the thinking that we did on the my universe, and the challenge that we're facing, like additionally to what I already have said?
I don't know, Shireen or Dar, if you want to take a swing at it, but I could. What do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to describe, but Daniel, go for it.
Okay, so as I understand, we had a whole process of discussions about like how do we demonstrate value sooner, how do we make it easier, lower friction to be able to populate your personal graph, to be able to find the get into flow sooner. And I think we realized that the organizer was flawed because you were dragging browser tabs into abstract topic spaces that you were not actually visualizing. And I think we determined that, hey, why don't we just put the browser tabs into the left menu, and then allow folks to drag browser tabs directly into the current space. That way, it's one step. You're already in a given context, that it's low friction. It is obvious what happens. And frankly, when we did the experiment, there's a sort of like emotional delighter that you get from like, I'm taking this tab and then boop, it's a browser card, there was something very satisfying about that. So it was like, it hit on all the high notes. It was easy to understand. It was instant. It was low friction. It was a delighter. And so that kind of told us we were on the right track. We were looking at the homepage, trying to figure out like, this homepage is kind of clunky. And it dawned on us like, hey, we're using the canvas metaphor for a lot of stuff. Why don't we just create a default space? We're calling it my universe. I don't know how that naming will shift or not, but like your top level main space that that we give you, that you start out in that place, that becomes your homepage. That becomes the place you start out when you first are onboarding, and you can basically like immediately, once you're on the My Universe space, immediately after signing up, you can drag a tab, assuming you've got your extension installed, and we've got a little bit of a flow for that. You'll be able to drag a tab directly from the left nav and drop it into your My Universe space immediately, instant gratification, low friction. Then it becomes a question of if this is to be your new homepage, how do we make it so that it doesn't become cluttered and you're able to navigate to the other spaces effectively? And we were really inspired by the Eagle Mode demo, I think it's called. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but it's like an infinite zoom sort of canvas. And we basically decided that like we want to do that and make that like we already have most of the machinery for that sort of infinite zoom paradigm. How do we make it really easy to create portals? How do we make it really easy to put things into those portals and to navigate and to prune your My Universe space? So I'll leave it at that. That's the high level summary.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Daniel. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that as well, something I think a lot about, I mean, we're all thinking about it, is just as soon as a new person lands into their Edvo for the first time, how do they know what they can do with it immediately, right? How do we remove the requirement of like watching a demo and like reading a shit ton of literature to learn how this product works? And instead, they come into their universe space and immediately they are given a mental model or some artifacts that informs their mental model of, oh, this is all the stuff I'm able to do in this environment. This is all the things that are available to me. And so one thing we're also thinking about as we think about that initial state of the universe is creating essentially a template of sorts where you see, like when you first enter your universe, you actually see your how-to documentation on using Edvo, but maybe that's presented in its own portal. And that portal is now part of your universe because that's part of your own educational journey. But also, not only does it give you that content, but it also shows you how portals work. It might include the PDF, it might include tabs, it might include essentially all the different information types that you are able to create space for in your database and visualize. We want to use the universe as kind of your like starting ground for that to be a little more obvious. Because right now, one of the biggest feedbacks we get, especially with the organizer implementation, is, oh, cool, I can, organize all my tabs in context. But the reality is when I'm working on anything, I'm not just referencing web pages, I'm also referencing my own notes, and I want to ideate, and I might have files that are also relevant. And that's, like for me, that's what's most powerful is Edvo doesn't discriminate where my information lives and mostly. And so creating the universe, that initial state to communicate that very obviously and clearly, that's also part of the thinking.
One other little call out that I wanted to mention is that essentially the goal here is to keep all of the power that we currently have, but make the UI simpler. And I think it will just happen to have the consequence of making it visually cleaner as well. One of the little things that we called out is how do I, like, what are some good affordances that we like that might be able to create portals or groups or categories or things like that. And one of the things that was inspiring was the iOS home screen organization. Whenever you long press on your iOS home screen and you drag one application icon on top of another, it automatically creates a group. And we're thinking something like that is a really simple modification of the machinery that we already have. But there's a lot of prompts that we can take from the Mac Finder and combine these to create something that is visually simpler, but every bit as semantically rich.
So do folks want to chat a little bit about the content for the My Universe space, like the initial state? For the users who are onboarding, like what do we want to put there? Shadeen mentioned that maybe there is like Edvo how-to portal, right? Maybe there is like a sort of a welcome note.
Honestly, like I think and maybe it's relevant. Like I think the content of it is irrelevant. More so, like we know the different types of appearances, I guess, right? Like sticky, portal, list view. Like we have that list, and we want to be able to demonstrate content in those diverse ways. But I think more so, it's like how do people interact with the space so that it actually feels useful, right? Like if there's a bunch of things, what would I, as coming into Edvo for the first time, what would actually help me start creating my own spaces immediately? And start just like, yeah.
How does it feel to have some content in this thing that is ostensibly mine already? How do I begin to develop feelings of ownership over that?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need in order to make it mine, in order to keep it organized, in order to integrate with my workflows, in order to be sufficiently flexible? I don't know if any of those are good prompts.
Yeah. Any type, because I'm going through all these different onboardings. Any type is a new app. It's like Notion on steroids, local first, all that good stuff. And their onboarding literally is, obviously they're very linear. It's a note-taking tool. So they just their onboarding is like a list of what people can do. But instead of that list being like, watch this tutorial, whatever, it actually, the way they present, I'm going to try to get a screenshot for you guys. It goes back to giving the person ownership. Like this isn't an onboarding list. It's actually your list. It's in your best interest. And by interacting with it, it's like you're starting to work, right? Like you're already getting value, because now everything is like you're doing the job you came here to do in a way. So I think the prompt of, how do we help people feel ownership of this space, instead of it just being this feeling like a static onboarding screen, because it's certainly not, right? It's part of their universe.
Right.
I'd like to refine our scope to defining like the key actions we would want anyone who is onboarding Edvo to take. And I think once we define what those key actions are, it'll be easier for us to kind of backtrack into, okay, how do we create that environment so that they take those key actions? To set the stage here for everyone, the onboarding essentially is they come to the website, you click on like join beta, you fill out the type form, you get redirected to sign into Edvo or sign up for Edvo. You then download the extension, and once you download the extension, you're dropped into this space with perhaps your list of tabs open. So that's the stage. Let's define what those key actions are, and then figure out how we can set that environment.
I don't know how folks resonate with this, but I would add reorganize, because there's like one of the key gates that we have to unlock here is after you give somebody a master space, they're gonna crap it up basically. And how do they get it into out of that crappy state and into an organized state effectively? So I don't know if reorganize is a good prompt.
Okay, sorry, I'm a little bit confused. Are we doing the key actions, or we are talking about the reorganization?
No,
for
I
the
mean, Daniel's mentioning that reorganization is a key action in that
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
So just making sure we take account for that. I'm trying to think of this from like my own user hat of when I come, if people are going to come to Edvo for all sorts of reasons. So I'm specifically talking about it from just like my main value prop reason, which is I'm context switching all the time. I've got clusters of related information. How quickly can I find the related stuff and cluster it? That's like that's the first thing I'm thinking when I enter Edvo. So
Yeah, I think the first thing is like, I just want to get stuff in so I can see what I can do with it.
yeah,
And if it takes me too long to get the things that I want in, I'm a bounce. So I think that calls, so like the first part of your desire, Shireen, of just like bringing in all of these things so you can cluster.
Or
And maybe that is like the second action.
what do you notice people doing like today? Do they create, I mean, the organizer obviously influences this big time, but like, do we imagine people will create spaces first in their universe and then drag stuff over, or will they just start dragging stuff over and see what happens? I'm assuming the latter.
Good question. Yeah. So based off of our initial V1 of the organizer, it was just dragging like one by one, drag one tab from the top of their tabs list into into like the right side to create a new space. And then going through that motion, except like as they went down their list, it was like, okay, does this fit in the space I created or is it a new one? And then just keep dragging things over. So I expect people to just drag stuff into their space and then start clustering.
Clustering.
Yeah, based off of that. And that's where the inspo for the Mac OS or iPhone just like app, if I put two things on top of each other, auto suggest a portal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so how does this look? First, bringing stuff in, it's potentially either importing tabs or uploading some files, and then starting to cluster stuff. So we should organizing things, adding some sticky or notes to enrich the context, creating a portal and moving stuff into a portal.
Yeah, I want to test with like what does this flow look like if it's just importing tabs and uploading some files. When I am trying a new tool or a job that I am like kind of hacking together with other tools, I essentially want to see how they what's it called? I'm like comparing how they work. So it's like if I had everything in Notion, I would kind of want to like bring everything in Notion into Edvo to see like, oh, what's the difference? Like, how does this like improve my workflow? So the importing tabs and uploading some files would make sense in that point. And I think we may need to start thinking about like, how do we make it easy for people to just like import other stuff from other tools? Maybe that's like the integration part of things. Not something we need for the prototype, but just like setting the stage for that too.
Yeah, I also think there might be, like, at least in very, superficial isn't the right word, but I'm going to use it. In like the more superficial conversations I've had with folks that aren't power users of Edvo, but have played with it. One of the things that they don't quite realize is like, they're like, well, all my stuff is in Notion and like, can I integrate Notion space into Edvo? And they don't like, in their head, it's not clear that actually you can contextualize all your Notion docs in Edvo. So like, we're not replacing Notion. We're not like, you can use whatever tools you want. But I wonder if there's like, before we even have integrations, if there's like little nudges of, and maybe the templates will help with this, but just helping people recognize that like, you can have Notion docs in here. You can have, wherever, like it's not an alternative necessarily.
Right.
Because
I think the templates would help with that.
Say that again?
I think the templates would help with that.
Yeah.
It's like paste your Notion or something in here. Because we do ask them this question in our type form, like what tools are you currently using for your information management? And so if we're maybe like to personalize it a bit, we can pull from those responses and like have a prompt that says like, bring your Notion into Edvo here.
Although I will say, my baseline assumption is that folks are going to want to be able to deep link into, you know, when they've got a lot of information in Notion or other note-taking systems, any sort of, certainly from the standpoint of using web cards, you can bring them into Edvo, but can you deep link and deep reference into specific Notion? I think they call them documents, but entities within Notion. And so there's definitely an integration question that I think a lot of people are going to ask. And maybe there's a sort of initial, you know, shortcut where we can use web cards for that. But I think it's important to at least have some kind of an answer in the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe just for messaging when we look back at this later, Alex, where it says bring in stuff from other tools. Maybe it's like bring in context from other tools. Because it's not necessarily the stuff, it's like all the work that I've already done in these other tools, all the connections I've made, or all these relationships I've already built. If that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a conversation about the integrations. Like when let's say we're integrating with Notion, are we bringing the structure, and we are creating a space which reflects the structure of your Notion database with like all the pages rendered, let's say, as web browsers, or we selectively, you know, bring some stuff from Notion in, and then in Edvo you are organizing it into the contextual spaces, you know, based on like what do you do with that stuff, right? For example, like in Notion, I have my requirements for hiring people and like the hiring process and the screening questions and stuff like that, right? And I create like a space for that particular thing. And every time I go into the interview, I just open that space, and you know, all of my hiring stuff is in there. Or I might have like something else in Notion, which is like a database which is related to a specific project that I'm working on at the moment. And every time, you know, I need to reference some information for that project, I open that space, right? So like, is it like we bring stuff from the Notion and then contextualize it in Edvo, or we bring the stuff and the structure of the stuff from Notion and just making it accessible in Edvo? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, and I understand. It's essentially like, what does the integration mean? Like, what information are we bringing in and what do we want users to do with them? I think that's a really good point. Probably out of scope for our discussion today, but something that we'll definitely need to define more when we get into integrations.
Yeah, 100%. So just taking like a little deeper dive into the first item, so importing tabs and uploading stuff. So I'm wondering, like, how do we help user to do that? Like how we are kind of like nudging them that, hey, you know, this is like the first thing that you need to do, you know, to learn the ropes of the tool and be successful with it. And there are potentially a couple of options there. So let's discuss, you know, what is going to work best. Like, you know, we might have, you know, the first item in your like welcome to Edvo card saying like import some tabs, and there is like a little image or a text description of like how to do it. Or we are literally going to, you know, keep the import dialog open, and you know, the like within the space while the dialog is open, there might be some graphics or notes kind of like pointing to that dialog saying like, hey, start over here. This is the thing that we want to interact with first. And bringing the tabs into Edvo is a great like on ramp for you to kind of like start learning the ropes. So I wonder, like, what do you think is more plausible thing? Like
I
creating
think
like
the
a state.
latter. I mean, I think we've already also validated that on-ramp. Like you give people that obvious, again, organizer needs work, but that on-ramp, people like we've had a very high conversion of people move their stuff in.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's a ladder. It's like, how do they immediately start working with their own content and actually start, taking one of those key actions?
Okay. So let me pull this thing in.
And I think it's so good because when you come to my universe and that modal is open, and it's again, you see a list of your stuff,
Yeah.
it's and if we have the templates in the right way somewhere, like I don't know what's going to be too overwhelming or not, but it's like the combination of seeing my stuff, because that's the stuff I want to do something with and I have urgency around, but then also seeing examples of what I can do with it or how this stuff can look differently instead of it just being a list of tabs, right? Or just open tabs. It can be in these like clusters and contextual spaces. It's like the combination of those two is what gets my brain buzzing. And so finding a way to be able to display that here without it being overwhelming is the thing.
Yeah. So I'm trying to make like a little visualization of this on the fly.
This is why
Yeah, it's interesting to see how we have the balance of like the context in the spaces so people know what can be in here / what to do, what to explore, but also like enough open space so people feel like they actually have room to move things in. Like there's enough space for my stuff kind of feeling.
Okay, so is something like this in line with the thinking, or it's off? We land on the space. The import dialog is open, right? This tool is active. You see the list of your tabs. You can bring them into the space with one click. You can drag and drop them, and there is a little bit of content into the space, kind of like pointing to this thing and saying like, hey, here is what it is, and here's what it's allowing you to do. So try interacting with it because it's gonna be cool.
Yeah. So I just kind of running through this. If this is step one, I would imagine as long as it's clear that, the drag and drop and all that stuff, I mean, it's clear and obviously our verbiage, but I imagine people would kind of do that one by one. They'll just start dragging things over and clustering things close to each other. I think the next question will be, how do those things turn into clusters? Again, do they turn into portals? Do they turn into spaces? Do they just sit next to each other? Like, one thing the organizer does well today is as soon as you drag related tabs, you're like putting them in buckets, right? You're putting them in spaces, and then you get to title the spaces. So at the very least, I know, okay, something has moved. It is in a space called this. Then my next question is like, how do I find it? What do I do with it? But before that, I think what I'm asking here is like, what gives me the confidence that I'm actually organizing my tabs? Because my desire isn't to bring them into Edvo. Like that's not what I'm trying to do, right? My desire is to put them in the right context, to group them together, to like very quickly feel like this stuff's related. And when I'm working on this stuff, I'll be able to come back into this like cluster of things.
I'm talking about the visual organization or like creating like a separate space for, first 3 tabs and a separate space for second 2 and the third one for the rest.
I don't know if that, like, I'm just thinking about what whether it's visually organized or not doesn't matter to me. Well, it probably does matter, but like that's important. But my question simply is, if all I did was bring tabs into my universe,
Yep.
right? And all I saw is them visually just appearing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. To me isn't the aha. Maybe it is, but like the aha is seeing the related tabs, you know, grouped together in some way.
And being able to highlight inside of the documents and relate those highlights to other things and drawing arrows and.
But even before all that, right? Like all that stuff is important, but it's even in the beginning, like before we even have all that obvious, it's simply the act of like I am creating my context. Like I can visualize my context, right? I can visualize this is the stuff that's together. This is the other stuff that's together. If I were to just drag those in my universe and cluster them and nothing happened except they're just next to each other, I don't know what that would do for me.
So what should happen besides?
I think that's where the when I drag like the next step of when I drag like one tab on top of another, like does it suggest a portal? And what that like workflow will look like, well, like that's a built-in feature that will be very discoverable once the user just like takes that action. So that's one way. The other way that we've talked about is like if you lasso over or multi-select your clusters, then auto suggest a portal. That one's not as discoverable. So it's like, is that something we want to make discoverable? Is the overlapping of two cards to suggest a portal not enough for like this initial workflow?
At this point, do people even care about portals? Like you have this application, right? It's kind of empty, you know, it doesn't really have your stuff in. And if I'm dragging in,
people don't care about portals, but they do care about categorizing, and it's a question of how do you visualize things in that category. You know, all of this comes down to visual metaphors for the graph, that people think in graphs. They don't know it, but they think in graphs. They want to organize things in graphs too, as evidenced, like the classic example is, I want to organize the documents on the files on my desktop, and I want to put it into this folder, but I also want to put it into that folder. And the file system doesn't let me put it in both places. Yeah, you could link it or whatever, but it's shitty. And so this, I think, is a fundamental question, at the risk of review here, that they want to be able to file things into multiple places and to be able to navigate to those places and have it be intelligible. They don't care about portals. A portal is just a visual metaphor that we can use in order to effectuate that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big assumption, that people want to file things into multiple places. I think there is a category of people who doesn't think in those terms, and they just want to file stuff into a place where they would be able to discover it later on. And being able to discover that easily is basically the thing that they are looking for, you know, when it comes to using the tool like Edvo.
I don't know if we need to get hung up on that, but I think I think that's like whether people would knowingly identify that as their top consideration. Yeah, nobody's going to say like that's the number one thing I care about. But it is a really, really common problem, and I think you know, our job here is to make the automobile, not just to make the horse better. They're asking for the better horse.
Right. But let me ground this in like what we have on the screen, right? Like I just downloaded the app. I have 9 Amazon tabs open, right? And like, what do I do from here? Like, let's say I start dragging the tabs into my universe, right? I did like first 2 tabs. I saw them up here. I put them together just side by side, you know, because I think like they are related. And I think, you know, that just having related stuff usually close to each other is a way to organize it. But to Shireen's point, it's not satisfying enough to have that level of organization, right? So what is that next thing that we promote in terms of organization that is making sense to the users and going to demonstrate the value?
And so I want to kind of return to the intention to make sure I'm understanding correctly, that this question, if it, as I'm hearing it, has to do fundamentally with the initial demonstration of value, not necessarily the long-term demonstration of value. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so I don't know how others feel. It might be nice to open this up a little bit, but specifically focused on the initial demonstration of value or perceptions of value. I think that a lot of that is weighted towards, I know it seems funny, but like, I think vibes matter more than just about anything for the initial impression. Can I put the things that are related next to each other? Oh, hey, that's way better than having independent browser tabs. That's a very superficial sort of experience. And I think that's not at all where the long-term value of Edvo is, but it may be where the initial value is. It may be that simple. I don't know if others have feelings on that.
I mean, I heard Shireen saying that it's not enough. It's not satisfying. Shireen, I still
I
that
need to be able to find my shit. Like, I'm using Edvo, and it's tough because I'm obviously coming at it with a very specific job story. But like, again, if people say their number one problem, and again, this is, let's open this up a little bit, guys. So non-internal team members, community members, please jump in. It's like, if I'm coming into Edvo, I just want to create space for all my stuff. So delight number one is, oh shit, I don't need a separate bookmarking app for my tabs versus my tweets versus Box for my files versus blah, blah, blah. Like, glee number one is, how quickly can I feel that this is indeed for all my stuff? And then number two is, not only have I created space for my stuff, but it's a space I can trust. I think there's a larger trust conversation, but at the very minimum, it's, I'm going to actually find this stuff. It's stored, it's saved, it's easy to retrieve. I'm actually going to be able to get back to these like 10 things and get into like work faster than my current setup. And that's where categorization to me is really important, or something like, it needs to be something that tells me, oh, these things are next to each other. Cool. We're going to cluster them. I don't know what it is. There's so many ways we can create that trust. But the point is, I need to know that this isn't just like a blank thing that I put stuff on, but that's not useful to me. Right.
So I want to interject, because I think that this is a fantastic prompt, and I'll keep this short. Searching, I think there are multiple ways of performing a search or doing a find operation. And we're definitely working on keyword search and full text search and all of that stuff, so you can search your entire graph. But the one thing that I think we were really missing before, and are still in the current iteration, is the sort of spatial memory. How it's not just like, it's great to have these different spaces, but if they're all just kind of floating out there, then they're not anchored. I don't have a good mental map. Whereas I think one of the big things that the My Universe concept buys us is it gives you a starting point for all of those things to blossom out from. And in a similar fashion to the way that, when I get up in the middle of the night and my house is dark, and I remember the path to walk through the living room and not trip over the coffee table or whatever, that the same exact phenomenon is happening when you develop a sort of spatial memory that I think is critical for developing feelings about where my things are and feeling in control. And whether they actually retrace those full paths every time to get to them, or whether they are able to jump using search or other affordances, that's great. But I think having the sort of mind map, for want of a better term, where I have a sort of emotional understanding of like, this is where they are because they're all connected. I think that's a thing that we get out of the My Universe design that we were missing before. So
I put a link in to someone's living book that they made, and it's an Obsidian, and you can navigate that from the left-hand sidebar, but also in the top right, which you can blow up into full screen. You can navigate it visually, and it shows the interlinking and interactions between each file, and if you will, like a mind map board, and you can click in there and navigate from that as well. I kind of like that, but I don't know if I'll have to.
yeah, and fundamentally the idea is that if you have a default space and you put, and the first thing you do is you put things into that space, and then as you like to categorize, if you want to categorize, it's basically a sort of like home directory metaphor. And you know, you get the home directory for free. You can create subfolders if you want, and you can reorganize, and then, you know, we can explore transclusion and you know, expose that. But that's because everything is connected at first. I think that lends itself towards feeling more of an understanding about where things are. I don't think you even need the lines and stuff. Like, we've got it, and that's important to have, but I don't think that's critical as much as just developing a spatial orientation.
Yeah. When you were talking about the spatial orientations, I was thinking about some sort of the anchor, like a starting point from which everything stems. And if you come to like My Universe space and it's kind of blank, maybe it has some content, but maybe you delete it. You know, let's say it's relatively blank, right? And I start dragging in stuff and like arranging it visually. There might be some relation to the anchor. You know, if there's like, I don't know, like my picture which says literally My Universe, like to make it a little bit more own and personal, and I position the stuff on the canvas related to that thing and related to one another. I think that might kind of like enhance that spatial navigation concept that you were talking about. But if we don't have that, and it's just the canvas, you know, in the state it is right now, and I brought in 2 tabs, and now I see them, you know, in the space. Like I'm still trying to get an answer. Like, is this enough, or we need to promote the next action as soon as a couple of tabs are on the canvas?
I think the key thing is combining the starting point. This is my default space, being able to bring things in, and then being able to categorize and drill in, create new spaces by way of creating that category. And the thing that we were missing before is that you were creating spaces that were somewhere out there abstractly, and I don't exactly know where to get them, and I don't exactly understand where they are, and I feel emotionally out of control. And it's like, great, it's nice to get rid of this tab, but also where the hell is it? Yeah. Versus, hey, I'm here, I'm bringing it here. Okay, now there's too much stuff here. I want to throw a lasso around this stuff and push it into a portal, whatever, however we call that, but like making that a really simple and satisfying interaction, that when I do that, it's not out there somewhere, it's right here. Yeah. And so at every point, I've left a trail of breadcrumbs where I can retrace my steps, and I know exactly where I'm at. I don't feel out of control, and I'm not spawning new spaces just randomly out into the ether. It's right here.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that, like, once we have a couple of things on the canvas, we want to promote creation of a new space or a portal to encompass the stuff that users brought in? Yeah. To kind of like teach them the concept of like, hey, you know, there are portals, there are things, you know, which are going to be included into the portal, and the portal, like if you created it in My Universe space, it's kind of like how you navigate to it, right? You can visually go there and click on it and go deeper.
Crucially, just in the act dragging something over as you happen to, on your way to wherever you're planning to drag it, your odds are you're going to happen to drag it over top of another card. And when we give you the prompting that hey, like if you drop this here, this is going to expand to encompass both of them, that I think is enough to trigger like, oh, okay, I've got this very simple, like bringing it in action, and then this sort of categorizing or grouping action. And those two things, I think, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff we want, but I think those two things are all that I believe are needed to create that initial aha moment, that initial value, perception of orientation, and also the sort of training wheels to building my personal graph.
Mm-hmm.
I think to revisit the key actions here, it's essentially just, I want to be able to bring things into this space, and I want to be able to group them. I think it's a conversation in itself of how we want to introduce, like, if we do even want to introduce like them to portals, or it's just like, hey, you're grouping things together, and then they can go, through that own discovery process themselves. But it's really those two things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the
let's take the
portal
time we have
way of visualizing a group, basically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think,
I'm
like,
not against the portal.
Yeah.
I'm saying how we educate the user on it. Like, in essence, it's a portal, but to the user at that point, it's, hey, I'm grouping these things together.
And they're the same thing. It's purely a nomenclature thing.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, and maybe group is actually easier nomenclature to understand, because portal might mean anything, and the group is like, oh yeah, I have stuff, I grouped it together, this is a group of stuff. Okay, it's kind of like easier to understand.
what's the difference between group and a space?
Nothing. It's
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
the same.
yeah. So
Yeah.
spaces, guys, spaces.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
I think it initially it's not going to be group or space. It's going to be.
Yeah, it's just gonna be the visual metaphor.
Like,
Yes, exactly.
No, there's no.
Yeah.
So I think, Alex, to your point, yes, we have to advance to the categorization, grouping, spacing, whatever.
Mhm.
I think the conversation here is the details of like interaction. That's what Daniel was pointing out. And I definitely think the visual analogy of seeing, like, again, but I don't remember, Alex, how much we had this conversation, but the organizer, the biggest problem was, again, you moved tabs and you kind of saw those spaces being created, but you didn't see the stuff in those spaces being created. Like, it showed up as a list view.
Right.
And so this is why I do think visual analogy of the portal is important, because clearly the list view was not. And so seeing your shit actually actively getting clustered and it's still there, but now it's just like, for Daniel's least favorite words, contained. That's still like, for me, it's like, oh, I'm actually, it's like I'm gardening, like I'm actually creating space for all my shit, and it's here. And then that visual mental map of, even long conversation on the mental map stuff, we're not going to get into it right now, but at least it's like giving me that spatial memory of, these clusters exist. And then I actually think from there is another advancement to, now what? Like, definitely, I'm going to see that categorization. And so the one part that I want to push back on is, like, it's not enough for me. It's cool for me to start doing that. And I'll get into, like, hopefully if we do this right, people start organizing their stuff, like, holy cool, like I can do all this with my tabs. But then the now what, I think from the beginning, make it, again, very clear, and I'm going to die on this hill. It's not just about tabs, it's all the other stuff I can also create space for. And then number two, how do we give them the confidence that they will be able to retrieve this stuff quickly? And I think that visual map is one of those ways to elicit that confidence, but I don't think it's going to be enough.
Yeah. I mean, good search is paramount for sure. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're in a good place. I think I can take the inputs and do like a little prototype for that experience, so we can go through it and see if we like it or not. And you know, the way the actions are promoted makes sense, and yada yada yada. So we'll take a next step on this tomorrow.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to everyone that's been chatting their thoughts. I'm reading through them now. I've saved this chat, by the way, for the internal team. So I'll share it with you guys as well. These are great. In the last couple minutes, or now 1 minute, any like questions or thoughts top of mind for anyone in the room, feel free to bring it up. Even if we can't address it right now, we can certainly address it in the community asynchronously.
Oh wow, there's 36 messages. Wow, okay, this is awesome. Yeah, I haven't following the chats. Super cool to see the activity there. Thank you so much for the inputs.
I'll just say one thing. With product analytics, the aha moment ends up being a statistical significance based on observed behavior. So you might not want to necessarily try and guess at what the aha moment is, but allow it to emerge once you get some users or higher volume of users with product analytics. Technically, aha moment is statistical significance, it's not guesswork.
It's kind of the chicken and egg problem. Like,
yeah, like
you know,
it's our like based on our own dog fooding, it's like hypothesizing what that value experience will be, and then obviously for sure seeing if we're actually right or wrong by putting people through it. Cool. All right, guys, anything else? Thank you so much for being here. Alex, thank you for hosting. Community, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was cool. Whatever your feelings are, please share any candid feedback. We want to just do whatever adds value to all of you and all of us. So thank you for being here, and we'll see y'all soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.